Hi, welcome to day 3 of me sharing the behind the scenes of what it's like to create my first ever online course, Gut Health Mastery, what goes into that, what inspired this journey, and how it's going being in the mere midst of it. So today I wanted to come on and talk about something that has been so fundamental for my own healing journey, which is understanding something known as the gut-brain axis. So I gave the little, snippy title to this, the science and soul of gut health, because I think when we start to talk about the gut, it's easy to think like, okay, we're talking about the body, the physical body, right? Talking about what's going on with your digestive tract and your organs. If we get into the hard science of it all, okay, we start talking about something known as the gut microbiome, the trillions of bacteria that live inside your gut. And then when we talk about soul, it's like, oh, that's a totally different thing, right? Like, oh, okay, so that has more to do with maybe your lived experience as a human in this body, in this physical. But what I want to talk about today is recognizing how we can peel back some of the layers that are maybe separating those, some of the stuff that's in between, seeing how easy it is to compartmentalize our body and our mind or our emotions, but recognizing that actually both the hard modern science and also the softer wisdom of many of our bodies know that there is a deep and profound connection between all of these different layers of our experience. So today I wanted to talk about that because I think the more you understand those layers and the more you understand how to work with them, you understand how they're interconnected. It opens up a whole new world of being able to heal because it opens up a new approach to your own health that is often not what many of us are doing when we're in what feels like a struggle or we feel stuck with our health, right? So today in particular, this talk, I hope you'll learn something. If you are somebody who, say, struggles with digestive issues, whether that is a diagnosed condition like IBS, IBD, diverticulosis, diverticulitis, GERD, or maybe you don't have a diagnosis, for example, right? Maybe you just struggle every day with constipation or bloating or gas or nausea or heartburn, right? But it has come to affect your life and it has come to make everything incredibly uncomfortable. Hi. This could also apply to you if you're in that bucket where you've struggled with your digestive health, but you feel like you've tried every supplement or every diet out there, or you've tried every remedy, but you still aren't quite feeling better. And as well, when it comes to the nervous system, if you feel like you've struggled for a long time with what feels like nervous system dysregulation, whether once again that's a diagnosis like PTSD, or whether you just are aware of your own intergenerational trauma that you're working through, if you're aware of your own developmental trauma of how, your family of origin and growing up affected you, and maybe shut down certain parts of your psyche and cause some issues for your ability to feel regulated as you move through your life. The thing is, with this knowledge of the gut-brain axis, it points us to this idea that actually those two things are not disconnected. In fact, if you were like raising your hand to maybe some of those first things, and you're also potentially raising your hand to some of those things about, the nervous system as well, then likely this knowledge is going to be really useful to you. Because the gut-brain axis is basically this, what science is calling today this fact that there is an immense amount of communication that goes on between our physical brain and all of the organs of our gut, which we could say, we could limit that just to the digestive tract, whether that's stomach, intestines, and the colon, or we could also then start to bring other things like your liver and like your kidneys, your adrenals into that conversation because they're all here in your gut. Whichever way you look at that, whether you look at all of the organ ring or you look at just the digestive organs, we can still know that from science we're starting to see more and more arrows pointing to this idea that the gut is our second brain. You may have heard that, but the idea is that whatever goes on in your brain has this whatever goes on in your gut has this profound impact in your brain. Just to give one example, serotonin is one of the key neurotransmitters in your body that actually signals a sense of well-being, a sense of being at peace. So if you can imagine, once again, talking about a dysregulated nervous system, we actually need a certain levels of different neurotransmitters to then feel the physiological sensations that we would either associate with peace or with saying something maybe feels dysregulated, something feels out of whack, something doesn't quite feel right. A lot of that comes from neurotransmitter signaling, which is essentially, normally we think, coming from the brain. But 90% of your serotonin is actually synthesized in your gut. So that means if you're struggling with, say, IBS or GERD or even just chronic bloating, chronic gas, chronic constipation, there are signals happening in your gut that are then actually going up to your brain, which then affect your mood, which affects your energy, which affects your mental clarity. So it's not just that our brain interacts with our gut, rather how our gut interacts with the brain. And think about this too for a moment. When you eat something, once you've chewed it, once you've swallowed it, you just have to trust, right? You cannot then think your way through that process. You cannot think your way to make your stomach perform its job. And you don't have to think of the moment when your stomach releases that food into your intestines. All of that, we could then say, is a subconscious process. Every process in your body that is not controlled by your conscious mind, such as moving a muscle or saying a word, all of that is controlled by your subconscious mind. So it's actually happening at this level of consciousness that's not easily accessible by your conscious thinking mind. So here we're also talking then about, at a more profound level, the connection between your conscious mind and your subconscious mind. Hope you're following there, right? Because this is where it gets juicy. So I'm going to talk too about the microbiome before I move on, because we're starting to get juicy here, but I wanted to talk about the microbiome because some people aren't familiar with what the hell I'm talking about when I say the gut microbiome. Or even when we talk about, I've oftentimes on this channel talked about digestive and gut health tips, and there's a distinction there. You may be wondering, well, if there's a distinction, what's the distinction? What's the difference? When we talk about digestive health, we're often talking about what I just mentioned, about the functioning of those organs, the functioning of the subconscious apparatus that is your digestive system. So it is actually how you process fats, how you process carbs, how you process protein, how you process food that comes in, and how that gets broken down into the building blocks that the rest of your body can then use. That is more of digestive health. When we're talking about gut health, we're actually talking about something known as your gut microbiome. And it's actually, the gut health refers to the environment of your gut. Thinking about it really as an ecosystem. Because this is the thing, if we were to, just put you in a test tube, human-sized test tube, and we were to analyze every single DNA strand in that test tube, the majority of the DNA strands would not share your DNA. They would be bacterial DNA. And then, when we look at all of those species, there are literally thousands of species of these different types of bacteria that live on your skin and that live inside your gut. Not just your gut, but literally the lining from your mouth all the way down to the other end, baby. It's all covered. We got you covered, right? Trillions of bacteria, trillions and trillions and trillions. This is why your gut microbiome and your probiotic health, so the health of those probiotics, of these microbes that are actually essential for things like digestion and even things like your immune system, their health depends on the environment that your body has created. So whether your body is a healthy environment for them to thrive or whether it is not. The thing is, a lot of modern science doesn't necessarily take into account how the quality of your foods then generates that environment. It's still very much focused on how, say, fiber can then influence the health of the gut microbiome, not recognizing that each body is going to be able to process that fiber differently based on its digestive circumstances. So based on the circumstances of the digestive organs themselves, it's going to be a very different process. So understanding the gut microbiome is really, really essential because if you're talking about healing your gut, you're not just healing the digestion, you're also then able to work with these trillions of microbes, but that involves creating a different environment in your gut. When there's an imbalance in those bacteria, it creates things like bloating and fatigue and brain fog, It can lead to greater inflammatory conditions. And so we want to be able to understand that when we're talking about healing at the level of your gut, healing at the level of your digestion is not just about you, but it's also about all those thousands and thousands of other little living organisms that live with you and inside your gut. So this is why I bring up a third factor that I feel and I teach is so important when it comes to healing your gut and healing your digestive system, being able to work with all of these different symptoms. And that is knowing your metabolic type. Your metabolic type is essentially based on your metabolism. Metabolism is how your body uses energy, how it breaks things down. It's sort of, I call it like the economy of your body because it's literally how your body runs. It's literally how your body allocates resources. Once you take food in, you have to be able to break it down so that your cells can then use it, right? How do you make what enters your body into this currency that your body can then use to perform your cellular functions, to then actually repair your cells, to allow yourself to do all of your things you do as an organism with all of your cells functioning and working together. The thing is, there are different types of metabolism. And by that I mean there's different factors within our genes, so within your genetic code, that actually mean that you more likely than not process certain things better than others. And if you've ever struggled with digestive health, if you've ever even just felt like you had a time where you got sick in your gut and things just felt off, or things fell off in your life, it's probably because you were better at processing certain things than others. And this does not just mean like food allergy or food intolerances, which can be a huge factor. But what I'm talking about here is something much more fundamental, and that's the ability to process macronutrients, process protein, process carbohydrates, and process fat. When it comes to a metabolic type, what we need to know is certain human bodies are better at processing protein, and certain bodies are not great at processing protein. That's why for certain people, it's really difficult to gain weight, to put on muscle, to hold muscle tone, why maybe you get things like cellulitis really fast and you're like, how can I even, mark and create more tone in these muscles? And that may be really frustrating. You might constantly feel like you're struggling, even just like to feel warm in your body, right? Like cold hands and feet, or pins and needles, or your joints crack and ache. And that is oftentimes because the protein that is needed to repair all of those tissues, to build those tissues, is potentially not being absorbed. When it comes to certain bodies don't process fat all that well. So, certain people can go out after a night drinking and then everybody goes for pizza and french fries, and that's the super greasy, fatty food. And some people do just fine. And yet other people, it creates this bomb in your gut where you just feel heavy, you feel lethargic, maybe you feel nausea, maybe you get acidity, maybe you get heartburn, right? And then the next day you feel even worse. And so for these people, it's often linked to metabolic and inflammatory processes because you've now put this oil into your body. And if you think about I'm going to use the example of a bike because I ride a bike, I don't ride a car. But if you also have ever had to pop open the hood of your car, and you have to put your hands in there and there's all this grease and this oil, it's sticky, it's gross, you don't want to be in there. For me, when my chain falls off my bike and I have to stop, I have to go grab the chain and move it back into its spot, my hand gets covered with all this grease. And the thing is, there's certain bodies for whom if you process fat well, you could actually just wipe off that grease, basically. You can digest it, you can process it. For the bodies that struggle to process fat, now you're just stuck with it, right? And that can create all these processes in your body that involve toxins, involve the inability to move toxins out of your body, and then starts to create an inflammatory process. Because if you imagine just having that oil, that grease, and all the stuff that goes along with it stuck, well, it could eventually irritate the skin, right? Creating more problems down the line if we can't process it. The third metabolic type is those who struggle to process carbs. And this is the kind of person who we all, maybe know somebody like this, or maybe this is you, where I remember being at a party once and I've always been very thin, and I was eating a bag of chips with a friend and she's like, you know what? I hate you because you're going to be able to eat this chips and nothing's going to happen. And tomorrow I'm going to have gained 5 pounds, right? And we're just there chit-chatting and eating chips, having a good time. But the thing is, her body was one of these bodies that struggled to process carbs. And so when she had carbs in her body, things like blood sugar spikes, right, to a huge degree, which then created all these other excess patterns in her body. So we could talk about people who, say, tend towards like diabetes or who are pre-diabetic, right, oftentimes struggle to process carbs. And so there's way too many carbohydrates, too many sugars floating around in their blood that have not been fully processed, that have not been fully metabolized. So it's important to know metabolic types when we're actually dealing with digestion, when we're dealing with gut health, because if we don't even know what we process well, what we don't process well, and how to create an environment where we can strengthen our weaknesses and then work to our strengths using the types of food we eat, it's going to be very difficult to actually create an environment for healing for your digestion and for your gut, for the microbiome. So I wanted to jump to just kind of wrap up this call, this idea too that if we're talking then about gut health being able to influence the nervous system, if we're talking about gut health influencing your neurotransmitters and digestive health influencing things like your blood chemistry, because if you eat something, you have to be able to break it down and digest it. That then has to be absorbed into your bloodstream, and boom, that's your blood chemistry. If there is something that makes that process run awry or makes that process difficult to actually fully break down all the things you need, such as a certain metabolic type, struggling to break down a certain nutrient, then you might be lacking that in your blood chemistry, and that blood chemistry bathes every single cell in your body and creates the circumstances for those cells to perform their jobs. So taking this into account, you have this subconscious level of communication happening from your cells to your brain of what needs are being met, what needs are not being met. And the same is going on in your gut of what needs are being met, what needs are not being met, how you would actually need to shift things potentially to get more of what your body needs. This has a really profound impact when we look at the gut-brain axis, because here we're talking about neurotransmitters. We're talking also about something that we can call your nervous system thermostat. Your nervous system thermostat is what I call essentially this concept that you have a certain bandwidth that you can process. What do I mean by that? We all have heard of something called the comfort zone, right? If you have ever been in your comfort zone versus when you're stretching out of that comfort zone to try something new, it can oftentimes feel scary. And the thing is, we don't often, when we stretch out of our comfort zone, like to stretch into things that are negative circumstances. So what do I mean by that? Of course, negative things can happen. We could call that a trigger if we wanted to, right? Something happens in your environment, you see something, you have a certain conversation, it's maybe very overwhelming for your nervous system, and then boom, you're in a fight, flight, or freeze state, right? It's affected your nervous system to that triggering degree. The thing is, there are times, and oftentimes, when, that we can say is a negative trigger, but even just stretching beyond your comfort zone of your brain trying to keep you safe, and keep you in this little space where, okay, don't try new things, don't start a new business, don't say the thing to your partner that you feel you need to say, right? As we start to dream up a new life, we actually have to be able to transform into a new person who takes different actions. But why is that so difficult? Why is it difficult to create a dream life? Well, a big part of that is because you have to go beyond your comfort zone to take actions that have not fit inside this little box of what your brain thinks is safe to do. So as you stretch beyond your comfort zone and you start to potentially take action towards the things you want, towards the dreams you want, there can be moments where your nervous system's thermostat still feels overwhelmed because it's out of its comfort zone. But what does this have to do with gut health? When we're talking about gut health and digestive health actually being able to influence the brain, we need to be able to understand that certain foods and certain environments that you're creating in your gut can also trigger a sense of unsafety, can trigger a sense of discomfort, can trigger a sense that you're outside of your comfort zone. And so what then tries to happen is essentially you have this really uncomfortable sensation in your body that then your mind tries to figure out, why do I feel unsafe? So there are actually many times when things like anxiety are not necessarily founded in something that's happening out there. We cannot 100% say that, oh, I feel anxious because I've watched the news, or I feel anxious because there's something happening at work, or I feel anxious because I had a fight with my partner. Sometimes, and oftentimes, when someone is in a triggered, anxious state, it's actually really hard to trace back, well, why do I feel this way? And even if we knew why we felt that way, the real truth of the matter is it wouldn't necessarily matter in that moment. In that moment, the only thing that matters is the fact that there are physiological sensations in our body and a charge within our nervous system that signals that I am not safe. There's something triggering our nervous system to say I'm not safe, and that is generally linked to something you're feeling in your body. It might be a tightness in your jaw or in your chest, it might be in your gut, right? And it can take on different tones, but every emotion is actually something that we feel connected to physiological sensations inside of our body. And the thing is, oftentimes that can just come from what is going on in the gut. Those physiological sensations can happen not necessarily because of something outside, but because of something that has happened inside that's creating a certain physiological sensation that our brain understands as a threat to safety. So if we're talking then about gut health, we need to understand, yes, there are certain foods that, for example, can trigger more adrenaline, that can trigger more cortisol, more stress hormones in your body. Things like alcohol, things like sugar, things like processed foods that make your, even just the fact that your blood sugar can like rise and fall and hit these peaks and lows, which is more the case not with complex carbohydrates, not with whole food sources of calories, but with processed foods, with things like sugar, things like alcohol. We could even say things like coffee, which create this spike of energy and then there's no real energy behind it. There's no nutrition behind it. It's just caffeine that hypes up your nervous system. When your body perceives, okay, there's this really heightened state, and then now there's this really low state, once you hit that low state, what's to say, how can I get back to that heightened state? In this low state, I feel like too tired to work. What am I gonna do? How can I make it through the day if I don't have my coffee, right? And there's even times where we are reaching for food out of emotion, where we're, say, eating our food, eating our emotions. And this all is a sense of, I feel unsafe, so what do I reach for? I reach for food. Why? Because there's something inside me that knows that when I get that blood sugar back up, when I get back to that internal state of feeling really full, okay, then I can actually feel safe. Because those other sensations in my body maybe actually feel unsafe. So a lot of this whole conversation urges us to look for and understand that while we can make these blanket statements of like, okay, processed sugar, processed foods, coffee, alcohol can create circumstances that create peaks and valleys of blood sugar, peaks and valleys of adrenaline or cortisol in your body. We also need to understand that your metabolic type then plays a role. So if there's something that your body is struggling to process, that is also going to create a stress load on your body and on your gut. When we're talking about that stress load, that brings us back to this sense of if you're trying to work to heal your nervous system, or if you're trying to work to heal your gut, what you may need is actually a different approach. Like if you feel like you've tried everything, say you're struggling with digestive stuff and you've tried to change your diet, you've tried to cut out certain foods, you've tried to eat really healthy, you've tried natural remedies, you've tried supplements, you've maybe even tried pills. You know, there's people who've struggled for over 10 years with their digestion, searching and searching and searching and searching for answers. But I would say, if that's you, it's likely there's still something essential missing from that approach. And if you are someone who has worked through healing your nervous system, whether that's through therapy or through yoga or through meditation or through qigong or through sound baths or ceremonies or plant medicines or whatever, right? You've gone down so many routes, but it seems like there's still just something that isn't quite right. In both of those cases, I would say you may need something different. You may need a different approach. And that approach cannot just be an approach that is this or that is dealing with my nervous system or that is dealing with my gut health. But that actually understanding, perhaps my approach now needs to take into the fact that these two are so deeply related, so deeply interconnected. So when I myself have undergone a lot of this healing, many of you may know, I also teach yoga, I also do body work, I've been practicing Ayurveda for a number of years. The thing is, I feel so lucky to have been able to have all of these processes that were very oriented around how to heal my nervous system. At the same time as I was learning so much Ayurveda and about how I can use my food to help create different internal environment for myself to heal. Because really, I don't think doing either one of those things alone would have gotten me to this state of connection to my body that I today experience. And this state of being able to feel like a master of my health, empowered around my health, and empowered around my choices, with what to do with my body, with my time, with my efforts. Having those two approaches together gives you a totally different paradigm to be able to face your challenges in a way that you can understand, okay, what might need to change? Is that in my diet? Is it in my lifestyle? Is it in my routines? Is it in, maybe there is somehow I can change up my sleep schedule so that my body isn't so stressed out, so that my gut actually processes better? Or it could even be that there's a way that we're thinking about things, or a certain belief that we hold around our body, or around food, or around what we should look like, or around what we should be doing with our time, how much energy we should have, what we should be dedicating our energy to, that is actually fueling our actions, our habits, and our approach to food and to lifestyle. Which oftentimes that's where a lot of the healing needs to take place, is in those deeper beliefs. In the fact that we're talking then about, okay, then you're saying to heal my digestive system or to heal my nervous system, I need to be able to heal both of those things, but both of those things are only going to be healed when I start taking more of the right actions on a consistent basis that are rooted in a different set of beliefs. Okay, this brings us to this idea that in that case, this is why I'm talking about why we cannot rely just on science alone. We have to bring a little soul into this picture, because there is a lot of science about our nervous system and our brain and how, around neuroscience, around how we look at the world and how our beliefs get rooted into our brain. But I believe too, unless we had a soul or a spirit that wanted something bigger, and even if you don't believe in those particular words, there is, I would imagine, still part of you, whether that's your higher self or just your heart's desire, there's some part of you that craves to not have to live a life of suffering. There's a part of you that craves not having to feel stuck. There's a part of you that craves not having to stay stuck with a certain symptom or certain patterns in your health or in your relationships or in your digestion for years and years and years. There's part of us that wants to change things. There's parts of us that wants to expand, wants to experience life in a new way. And in order to experience life in a new way, we need a game plan, we need a vision of who we can become, and then we need to actually start taking the actions that person would take. That might lead us on a journey closer to ourselves. That could lead us on a journey closer to our body. That will often lead us on a journey where we find more and more answers, because we're searching for them where they really are. We're not just looking for the next quick fix. We're not just looking for the next quick Band-Aid. We're not just looking for the quickest way to escape the symptom anymore. We're actually then looking at what is really deeply at the root of this, that is not allowing me to expand, that is keeping me stuck, that is not allowing me to change, that is not allowing me to experience the life that I want to live, free of digestive discomfort, or free of feeling so triggered in my nervous system so constantly. That's where the soul bit works in, where that higher self bit works in. And so when we can actually recognize that that plays an essential role in this journey of healing, in this journey towards health, then I believe we're on the right track. At least in my experience and the experience of so many people I've met, it's not until our beliefs shift and that we start to really recognize that oftentimes our beliefs around self-love or our beliefs around our body and how we honor that body, as opposed to criticizing it or judging it or wishing it was different, wishing it lived up to societal standards. You know, we may have to change our beliefs around our self-worth. When those beliefs fundamentally shift, then often we take different actions on a more consistent basis that over time create a healthier body and a happier life experience. Which is why when I made this program, and part of what I aspire to do with this program, with Gut Health Mastery, you know, part of why this is such a big part of the behind the scenes is because I believe that a big part of what we need to heal as a collective needs to happen on the inside. Like, it needs to happen in here, it needs to happen in here, and it needs to happen in here. We need to be able to connect, we could say, our three brains: our brain, our gut brain, and our heart. And I didn't want to just create another program that just taught people Ayurveda, because I wanted to teach people how to put that into practice in your own life. I didn't want to create another program that just taught people about, okay, here's the right diet. Here's what should be going in your gut, and if you just eat these things and you just follow these rules, good. And if you don't, then bad, right? Because how many times have we been told that by society anyways? And how far has that got us? Following someone else's rules, right? We need to write our own rule book. And I really wanted to be able to create a program where somebody with any body type felt welcomed, felt seen, felt understood, felt like they could finally understand things about their body, felt like they could finally understand things about their life, like they could understand things about their past and their history, and holy crap, that's why that happened. And also, beyond that, move on and create a new, more powerful vision for their lives, for their healing, for their journey, and for what's ahead. Because I really believe that gut health, it's the foundation of health, and our health is the foundation of a life we love and enjoy to a great degree. It's not impossible to love and enjoy and have a very passionate life having health difficulties. But the reality is, if you can prevent a health challenge or a health difficulty, why wouldn't you? Right? Why wouldn't you do that so that you could live a juicier and longer and happier life? Because you deserve that. Sometimes we just have to unravel these beliefs that we've been walking around with for a really long time that we don't deserve that. Because if we don't believe that we deserve a happy, long, fulfilling, emotionally rich, relationally connected life, that's when we often take actions that mutilate our body, that ignore our body, that ignore what our body really needs, that ignore our emotions, that shut down our emotions, that swallow our emotions, that have us look away from what is asking to be seen instead of looking straight at it and asking instead, what do you need and how can I help? Because when we can have that conversation with our body, and we can recognize, as I mentioned earlier in this talk, our body is not 100% conscious. It is subconscious. There's subconscious processes happening here. So we can't just talk our way into it. If we would have talked our way into it, most of us probably would have just done it, right? We would have just been like, oh, you're beautiful. Affirmations, we would all just be doing affirmations, and affirmations would have healed everything, and the world would just be peachy keen, right? Like, I'm beautiful, I'm healthy, I'm perfect, done, right? But the thing is, our body doesn't speak that way. Our body speaks through physicality. Our body is a physical thing. Our body speaks through food. It speaks through how you treat it. It speaks to, I mean, think about this. I'll just leave this as this last little food for thought on the call. There's certain clients that I've worked with that I've asked, if you had to think about how you treat your body, right now. In terms of your diet, when do you go to sleep? What routines do you have? How do you talk to yourself in the mirror? How do you talk to yourself in your head? How do you string yourself along during the day? How do you run your energy thin? How do you have fun? How do you have a good time? How much time do you dedicate to what's really important to you? Think about all that, and then think about how you would treat your kid, or how you treat your favorite pet. And oftentimes, the difference between how someone is treating themselves and how they would want to treat their loved ones, or how they would want to treat their pet or their kids, is very different. So if we understand that our body understands the language of our actions more than just our words, then we understand that our actions have a big weight to them. Because that is what's actually influencing our health. That's what's influencing this environment that our body then uses to communicate back to us how we're doing and how we're feeling. So I'm going to leave it right there for today. I hope you do something today that feels loving, that makes you feel like you are deserving of love and you are deserving of taking steps towards a brighter life for yourself. And a big part of that involves listening to yourself, cutting out a little quiet time just to be with yourself, just to contemplate. See how you can put the world on pause for a little bit, because the world moves so fast, life moves fast, and it's so important that we understand how we feel matters. It's so important that we prioritize that. It's so important that we don't put so much pressure on ourselves, because that's another way that our body starts to resist, starts to feel the weight of that. So today, practice being a little softer. Practice leaning into what feels like the soul of what your body is craving. And I love you all, and I'll be back again tomorrow for some more good stuff. So bye for now.